Indiana Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman. He is a member of both the House Committee on Financial Services, the House Budget Committee, as well as the House Freedom Caucus. He had a lot of membership cards in his wallet. Congressman, good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. You have expressed on social media a desire to take a little bit longer, to not necessarily live within the confines of the July 4th deadline. How is that going over?
Well, Major, great to see you. And, it's one of those situations that, we're not the boss. I'm not the boss, so I don't get to determine exactly the timeline. But I do think that it goes back to what some folks have been saying earlier, is that, maybe this deadline on July 4th was something that we should just, back off a little bit. I think that would have been a good idea. But at the same time, I can also understand the president's, position that we move forward, let's get it passed, and move on. The thing is Congress is meeting again next week, and so we're going to be working on new legislation, spending reductions, finding savings, reforms that are all going to be important for the American taxpayer and really to get the federal budget back under control. But, I just wanted to take some time. As a business guy, I was in Congress, left for several years, was back in the private sector, and I always felt like a little more time looking at a deal, it just gives us a better perspective. But you know what? If the vote is on the board, I'm going to take a serious look at where things are at and, make my decision on what I think is best for Indiana in the 3rd District.
Of course you will, Congressman. I'm the kind of person who remembers floor speeches even from long ago, and I remember lots of Republicans decrying Democratic tactics to rush big pieces of legislation to the floor and saying, no one's read this. The public hasn't read it. Members of Congress haven't read it. There hasn't been enough time to be diligent about what's actually in the legislation and what the implications are. It seems like that's exactly the same position you find yourself in now, and your Republican conference is like, speed it up, which a while ago you guys didn't like.
A little bit. Yeah, no, I mean, a little bit, because this is, we sent over the first version, the bill that came out of the House that was sent to the Senate. I feel like it was a really strong bill. I'm on the Budget Committee. We worked through that process, and so most House members are very familiar with the original language. So now we've got to track down the Senate language that was changed and make sure that we understand what it does and what effect it will have on our constituency. And so, we've all had some time to do that ever since the bill passed in the Senate, and we had an idea of where they were going, but you never know until the final language is actually passed. I'm pretty confident. I understand the parts of the bill that I have an issue with. Of course, anytime you're raising the debt ceiling, to me, that just bothers me. I just don't like the idea that we're going to increase the debt ceiling to as high as it is. But at the same time, in this bill, we're keeping the tax rates current, and we have to keep the Trump tax cuts in place. And so those are two of the biggest pieces for me. We got to grow the economy, and that's how we're going to get, out of this debt number that we're currently facing of $37 trillion. We've got to grow the economy, and we've seen a flat economy over the past couple of decades where we're not seeing that 3% growth that we're used to. We're actually seeing like 2.2 to 2.5% growth. And so I trust that President Trump and the plans that we have to grow the economy are truly going to work, and that's going to help us reduce those debt and deficits in the long run. But, boy, I tell you, Washington sure has taken its time to actually address these issues.
Speaking of that economic growth, I went back and looked at the numbers. GDP in the 2018 year, first year of the Trump tax cuts, 2.8%. The next year, 2019, it was 2.6%. It wasn't 3% in either of those years. Why are you so confident this bill will kick it over 3%?
Well, so, we have got to get back to that number because it's a lot of revenue that comes in. I think there's several factors. I think that we're coming in on, this new industrial revolution of AI and technology. I think that's going to help increase. Also, the fact that President Trump's tariffs are going to push more manufacturing jobs back to the United States. I come from Northeast Indiana, Fort Wayne, Indiana. We've seen over the last several decades manufacturing just continue to leave our part of the state. And I've got stories like that of, schools that see just a drop in their enrollment because families are leaving and those jobs just aren't there. So I think that Trump's focus on manufacturing, agriculture, bringing jobs back to the United States, we're going to see an increase in GDP. And that's what's needed to happen for a long time, is a president that focuses on the trade policy that protects American jobs and brings those back. And then also good tax policy is also going to have a huge boost to that GDP. So I am confident. Now, I think the 2.6% number that we have in the House bill is the right number because of the historical data. But we can get back to that 3% when we start looking out for America first.
Congressman, before I let you go, map out tonight and tomorrow. What is it going to look like when someone in my audience sees a phone alert update? What should they be most watching for to determine if this is going to happen before or after the July 4th arbitrary deadline of one Donald J. Trump?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of conversations. I've been talking with the White House. I put out a post yesterday talking about the debt and the deficits because that is what I think is the biggest threat to the United States. We've been having some really good conversations. There's going to be rescissions packages coming that we're going to be cutting spending. The Department of Justice just announced, too, findings and charges on Medicare and Medicaid fraud of about $14 billion. There's a lot of that's going on. And so there's a lot of work to do outside of just this particular bill. I think my hope is we get it across the finish line, but at the same time, we have some serious conversations about what's next in order to get the economy growing again, keep taxes low for the American people, but also cut spending that we see in Washington that's just out of control. So who knows? It could happen at 3 a.m. tonight.